From Washington, this is VOA News. The U.S. reportedly is looking at options to force peace talks in South Sudan. Central African Republic's president and prime minister stepped down. I'm Vincent Bruce, reporting from Washington. The White House Friday declined to confirm a report that the United States is considering imposing targeted sanctions against the government of South Sudan. Washington reportedly is evaluating ways it can maintain pressure on opposing South Sudan parties to bring an end to fighting. Senior White House correspondent Dan Robinson has more.
White House spokesman Jay Carney was asked about a Reuters news report from the United Nations that the United States is weighing imposing targeted sanctions in a move to increase pressure on warring parties. Reuters quoted what it called a source briefed on U.S. discussions. It said this was confirmed by another source, but both provided no details on precise measures being considered. Carney said he could not respond to the Reuters report, but Jonathan Lally, Assistant Press Secretary for National Security, said the United States is continually evaluating what more we might do to keep up the pressure on the parties to make progress on negotiations. Dan Robinson, VOA News, the White House.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon Friday called on rebels in South Sudan and the country's government to agree to an immediate ceasefire.
South Sudan is at a crossroad. This crisis can be resolved only at the negotiation table, and I urge the two sides to negotiate in earnest.
Moon spoke at a news conference Friday saying he had asked South Sudan's President Salva Kiir to advance the negotiations by agreeing to a key rebel demand to release 11 rebel political detainees. Mr. Kiir's government has refused to do so. That issue is believed to be holding up a proposed cessation of hostilities agreement at peace talks in Ethiopia. The Central African Republic's President and Prime Minister resigned Friday under pressure from regional leaders after months of deadly sectarian violence. The resignation of President Michel Djodocha and Prime Minister Nikolai Chengay was announced Friday by the Secretary General of the Economic Community of Central African States following the conclusion of a two-day summit by the group in Chad. ECAS leaders said talks will be held in Bangui, the CAR capital, to decide the country's new leadership. In Washington, the U.S. State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki said the U.S. focus is on the CAR moving forward. Syrian activists say nearly 500 people, including 85 civilians, have been killed in fighting among Syrian rebels and hardline Islamist State of Iraq and the Levant, or ISIL. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said Friday that 482 people have been killed in the 7 days during intense clashes in Aleppo, Idlib, and Raqqa provinces. Of the 85 civilians, it said 21 were executed by ISIL fighters and the rest were killed in crossfire. There are less than 2 weeks until a planned international peace conference on Syria is to be held in Switzerland. Friday, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon called for all parties to work toward a political solution.
We deeply regret that the Indian government felt it was necessary to expel one of our diplomatic personnel. This has clearly been a challenging time in the U.S.-India relationship.
And that was sound from Jen Psaki, the United States Department spokeswoman. She was commenting on the report that the United States is withdrawing a diplomat from its embassy in New Delhi. That action is being taken in response to a demand by India in a growing dispute between the two countries. Saki said Friday she hopes the move will bring closure to the situation, which involves an Indian diplomat whom the U.S. accuses of underpaying her housekeeper. Iran's deputy chief nuclear negotiator says talks with world powers on Tehran's nuclear program have concluded with solutions on all points of disagreement. Abbas Avranchi made the comment to Iranian state-run television Friday after 2 days of talks in Geneva. All the latest at voanews.com, 24 hours a day. I'm Vincent Bruce, VOA News in Washington.